All right, we are live. We hope. We hope we're live.
We are good at Midjourney. We are not good at LinkedIn Live. It's okay. Things happen. This was a little bit of a scramble here to get this going, but hopefully we'll have some people tune in so we can get some questions. But again, Drew, awesome to see you, man. Glad to finally do this. If everyone doesn't know here, Drew and I do a lot of stuff on Midjourney, and that's a lot of what we talk about. We met probably, I don't know, 2-3 months ago. A little bit of us really going through and talking about different things that we're doing on the platform. And, I forget who connected us. Maybe it was Sam Brown or someone like that. I was like, you guys should check each other out. But naturally kind of just hit it off. So that's why we're here today. And that's what
I think I found you, man.
Did you?
When I started doing the Midjourney stuff, and I'd originally just been posting a lot of marketing things, and then I posted Midjourney. I was just curious, like, who else was tinkering around with this in your name? I started seeing Rory Flynn. I'm like, okay, this guy, me and him need to check. We need to talk.
Yeah. So naturally, as soon as I saw your stuff, I was like, oh, here we go. There's a conversation. So that's awesome, man. No, it's good. I'm glad we got connected. So just so everyone gets a quick little rundown on what we're going to do here. If we get people in the comments here, that's going to be awesome. If not, Drew and I are going to run through some stuff one way or the other. But overall, going to give you guys just kind of a wax poetic on what's been going on with Midjourney, just our thoughts, our opinions on some things. If there's questions to answer, we're definitely going to get to those. We'll stop every couple minutes. And then from there, basically kind of where we think this platform's going, what you guys can expect in the future. So that being said, I'm just going to tee Drew up real quick, let him go. But I just like, why the hell Midjourney? Like why this platform? Why not anything else? Like what attracted you to this thing?
Yeah. And while I'm diving into this, do us a favor and just drop a comment here for us, just so we know that this thing's actually working. Because that would be great. So why Midjourney, right? Like that's ultimately a big decision now, because right, you've got all these tools that exist, right? And Midjourney is not the only one. For me, like my journey, I guess, to using Midjourney really started in outside hobbies and activities, from my day job. So I'm a photographer, designer. I've always been attracted to aesthetics, right? And then I had twin girls 2 years ago, and all of a sudden time for photography and editing and all that just evaporated. So then it was just like, okay, so, I was kind of missing that. And then all of a sudden Midjourney comes along. I see some things about people posting about it. And I just thought, hey, this looks fun. This looks cool. Right. And started playing around with it, and did that long enough to where you started to see the quality jump, and exactly what I'm talking about. But then it was this sort of light bulb moment of, this is not just fun anymore. This also has utility. So this opens up a whole other world of possibilities. And you and I both have this sort of like really aesthetic eye, and it's just Midjourney is the best tool for that. It really is sort of like the Photoshop for creators, right? Versus something like Canva, which you and I have talked about. We'll probably talk more about, but yeah, that's ultimately led me there. And, like you said, right? Like, I think we just kind of bumped into each other because we were both trying to bridge this gap of education of like, hey, other people need to be on board with this. This is an awesome tool. It's very powerful. And, the quality is only going to get better. And so that's how you and I sort of bumped into each other. But same question, let me throw that right back at you. How did you get involved with Midjourney? Why Midjourney specifically?
It was a unfortunate or fortunate late night Twitter doom scroll where it was just like, what the hell is this? Like, I just saw people creating stuff. I mean, it was like the Pope in like Balenciaga fashion. I'm like, what is going on? What is this tool? So yeah, I was immediately was like, I could do that, as long as if it's just you type in a couple words, you generate an image. That's cool. So, immediately got on there, probably spent like, I don't know, 6 hours the first night on there, and just like, what is this rabbit hole? I'm creating, interdimensional, like neon colored aliens. And I'm like, oh, this is legit. This is fun. What else can I do with this thing? So that was kind of where it started. And I always really focused on LinkedIn on my covers, right? Like if I'm doing carousels, like I want the covers to be sexy. I want them to be colorful. And I spent so much time in damn like Shutterstock and like Pexels and all these stock photography sites. Sorry, guys. I just stopped using them. I was like, I can create something that exactly what I need. Like I just need, a short circuiting robot with neon flares coming out of its head. Great, done, 5 seconds. Awesome. Didn't have to go search through all that stuff. So like right away it had translated content, or translated to my content immediately. But that was quick lived, right? Like the novelty wears off. You're like, this is so cool. I can create all this stuff. But what is the use of this damn tool if, it's not just for creating carousel covers? So there was a few things that from the agency standpoint, if, people probably aren't very familiar with my background or either of our backgrounds maybe, but I work a lot in e-commerce and we focus specifically on email marketing. Now there's so much creative that's needed there. And it's out of control at some times of the year, like this one right now, when it coming up to Black Friday, some brands are sending 3 to 4 emails a week. Some are sending 3 to 4 emails a day. Now, without insane amount of creative, what are you going to do? You're just going to reuse the same stuff over and over and over and over again. And also you're just pulling from, from a marketing standpoint, you're just pulling from whatever assets you have. So sometimes it doesn't even tailor to the message. So this is a way for us to really look at the tool and be like, can we get creative here? Can this help? And just like immediately started playing with that and injecting it into our workflows and what we're doing. So it was, naturally same kind of idea here. Just started playing, everyone does the create your futuristic stuff. Like, let's do
right
selfies. And then you're like, wait, hold on.
Yeah. I mean, like, right. It's a visual tool anyway. So it's like, it only makes sense to showcase it in a visual way. Yeah. And, I think the interesting part too, right, that you just brought up is both of us saw the use case into the business world, right? And we started to implement that. We both did. We both have very unique, similar, but different experiences in that realm, right? Like you're on the e-commerce side, I'm in this tech startup world, but like either way, we were able to apply that and not just apply it in like, hey, this is fun and creative and cool, but like it actually helped the workflow. We were able to move faster with our teams. We were able to save money in the process, right? Because you don't have to hire a professional photographer to get certain shots or fly them out to a location or scout that. To your point, you don't have to rely on the same stock images that everybody else is using in tech, and probably e-commerce too. And it's like, we know what those are. And so, and can we talk about how painful, right, stock imagery and going through that is? If you're in charge of brand and you're trying to find something that fits your brand in stock, forget about it, right? So having the tools to manipulate and get there is so key.
Yeah, I think it's a natural progression too, right? Like I feel like that's the same way it is with all AI tools, where it's just here. I found a need for this, right? Okay, like maybe it started for me, right? Like I needed carousel covers. That was one thing, but it's like, okay, now I can translate this process and keep it going into other things. So it's not just like a singular use tool. Like there's a ton of different applications for it. I think it's where everyone starts though. You got to start small. It's like, well, I need to fix one problem. Great. Let's fix one problem. And then you start to see, like ChatGPT, when it came out, everyone's like, oh, it can write my sales emails. Great. Now I can do data analytics, so it's like, it's versatile. These tools are like that. But it's just, I don't see it slowing down ever. I don't know. Like I don't really know where the end of it is, but I think we're still like, I don't know. It's like a toddler right now. And we don't even have full control over what we're doing. Some platforms, yes. But like realistically, this thing is moving at light speed, and I don't know how much better it's going to get. But also to hit on your point, stock photography, miserable.
I mean, it really just it's mind-boggling when you think it's only going to get better, right? It's only going to get better. So anyway, that's wild, right? We wanted to give you a quick introduction, but look, we cut some of this time short because of the tech issues. We both have to jump right at the top of the hour, so we want to make this efficient and as helpful and value as possible. So please drop your questions in the chat. If you guys don't have questions that we're seeing pour in and we're not addressing, we also have some talking points that we can jump into that are pretty interesting as well. So drop those below and then we'll just talk through them really quick. Audrey's got a question, a little bit more broad, but tell us your top 3 AI secrets. I guess that could be related to Midjourney. Maybe let's try to keep it Midjourney related if we want. Anything come to mind?
Yeah, I think there's a few. Like, it's not a secret. It's just realistically the best way to get proficient with the tool is to know the tool. That's my personal opinion. Is Midjourney itself has so many different functionalities, which is why Drew and I both talk about this a lot. the more you understand the fundamentals of the tool, the easier it is going to be for you to actually go and produce at scale. So it's the same theory. If you play basketball, you got to learn how to dribble before you make a behind the back pass. Like it's just understanding how the tool works, what the different functions do, how the different commands work, so that you know exactly what you're doing instead of just prompting endlessly. Because then you'll run out of hours, you'll probably get frustrated, and you won't get what you want. So something like that, very simple. I would say having a structure in terms of what you're prompting. Once you've done this for a number of hours, you'll start to see kind of the different intricacies and what works and what doesn't with prompting functions. But having like a general structure, like telling AI a story, to me that always works very well. So who's the character? Set the scene. Like what's going on in the image. Don't get too complicated. That's my third one. Is just don't try to have like Gandhi and Obama and like some other public figure shaking hands, playing basketball. Too many subjects can be way too hard. So
you know the limitations, right?
Yeah.
And there are certain levers that you could pull to try to get to those complicated things, but even that may not work. So I'm just assuming everybody here is not an expert, but there are other things that you could, potentially use, parameters, commands that can kind of get you headed in the right direction. So like Audrey, I'll try to come up with 3 on the spot here, but I think like jumping off what Rory already said, which are great ones, I think of something him and I have talked about too, is just the prompting process.
Yeah.
I don't know how everybody goes about creating prompts, but it's definitely not just sitting at a blank screen and typing things that come to your imagination. Yes, that is certainly one way that you can do it, right? And it's a creative way to do it. But going back to something Rory just touched on, but like having some structure or different things that you can do to get there. And there are several things, right? There's looking at it and creating it from the top of your head. There's having some sort of prompt templates or structure in place where you can plug and play different variables, right? So different subjects, locations, angles, lighting, colors, etc. You can certainly browse something like the explore page on Midjourney to get a sense of like, hey, I like this style, right? And you can click into it and kind of see prompts or how they went about creating certain images. And that also helps level you up in terms of, okay, like I didn't even think about including this, or I've never even heard of this word, right? So I think there's power in that. I think there's power in like taking an image and using something like the describe command, and running the prompts that it feeds back just to kind of like see what other kind of variations you can get. It doesn't create things one for one, but I use that as a jumping off point too. Like if I like certain things about a style, and same with image prompting, right? Like using that in the image weight with your prompt, and sliding up that variable. Rory and I talk about this a lot of time. Like if there's something, you like the essence of a photo, but you don't want that exact photo or something even close to that, you lower the weight, the image weight on that. And, you play with different variables within it. And that's where something like permutations, where you put the curly bracket, you run those things at once, so speed prompting and doing those things a lot faster come into play. And on the opposite end of that spectrum with image weight, if you want something that is a little bit closer, play with that scale on the other side, right? And just kind of see where you can get. And so, there are several ways, point being, there are several ways to create great images. Play with all the different ways, right? Because it doesn't have to be one thing or nothing.
Yeah, that's an awesome point. Like when you get to certain, like again, going back to the fundamentals, right? When you understand how to use image weight and you understand how to use image prompting, your life becomes a lot easier, because oftentimes I get a lot of questions, right? Like people will ask me, how do I get XYZ picture and I want it to look like this? I'm like, well, use a picture that looks like that already.
Yeah.
Build your prompt and then adjust it with image weight. It's like the same. Once you know that process, you can do it over and over and over again. It's like the concepting of doing it that way.
Totally. Yeah.
And I think you have an awesome process, like in terms of even just going through that, transparently, everyone. Drew and I talked before this, just because we wanted to get on the same page. But I was like, dude, what actually is your creative process? How does this work? Because I know mine's probably different. I know yours is probably different. Like, I think it's interesting to know, because that's where the sauce is, right? Like, I think there's this misconception that if you have a prompt that like everyone uses, it's just going to generate great stuff over and over again, right? Like, great. There's prompts that will work and will work in perpetuity, but having like the creative vision is where it all starts. That's the start and the end of it. It's like if you have a vision for it, you can create it. You just have to back engineer it to get there. So like I'm just going to ask you that one real quick because I think it's an important question to have everyone sort of conceptualize. But
yeah.
No.
I love this question because you just hit on a really key point, right? Which is like you can create singular images, great singular images pretty easily, right? Like once you kind of know what you're doing, but how do you sort of tell a story or a vision or expand on that, right? And so that's when it comes into more of like this, you know, something you'd see with like runway or video or even like cinematic stills. Like you're trying to get different angles and tell a bigger story that's cohesive with the images. They've got the same sort of look and feel. You know, there's a little bit of like intrigue in terms of what's being communicated through the photos. So I think that comes into play, right? And that's where it's really interesting to have something like a repository of the available options to you, right? To maybe build out something like prompt templates or something to kind of capture that full story. Mm-hmm. And I know that you've done this previously, and I'd love for you to hit on it too. Like you put out a post, I mean, a while back, right? Where you basically created a scene of like a hotel in Tulum or something like that, right? And you visually painted the entire picture of somebody coming, you know, into the lobby, to the drink that you got, to like the pool, the room, et cetera, right? Like that's what we're talking about. So while it would be relatively easy to create a lobby of a hotel with a certain look, how do you then, right, continue that story through different scenes, different angles, et cetera?
It's that one. You know, those are probably the pieces that take the most time, right? Because it's not about just like having the vision for the entire thing. It's about building consistency, right? Like building consistency across the image, look, and feel. Now that comes down to, I think, a few different elements, right? Like a lot of what is the intricate pieces of the prompt. Like you have to get essentially like the mood, you have to get the lighting, you have to get the color scheme, like a few things that just need to be consistent in every single one. If it's architecture, right? Like you want to have the same type of architecture visual, you know, if it's just, you know, Gothic or whatever you're talking about, you want that to be consistent in the prompt. At the end of the day, you're just changing then like the subject, right? So if we're thinking about this as a prompt structure, like we have subject, we have the environment, we have, you know, basically some details and modifiers. I like to use a lot of cameras in mine because I just feel like it gets a little bit better of a look and feel. That also too, cameras, film stock, that has to stay consistent throughout it all, so the look is consistent. And then from there, it's really just changing the subject environment. You know, then you can start to build like an entire concept of how this whole thing looks. Now, the most time spent is in that initial prompt formula, right? That initial look and feel. It's like, now I have what I want. Now I have to translate that. Also, quick tip, you can take that into ChatGPT and essentially say, okay, here, I want to do, you know, different shots for different areas of the hotel and just like build me 5 prompts based on, you know, the lobby, the whatever, the pools, the hotel, like a hotel suite, the penthouse, the bar, and it'll do that for you real quick. So you can also run that at scale using other tools like ChatGPT, which I tend to use a lot of. So yeah, that's a labor of love, right? Those take a lot of time. We also got to make it look good.
Yeah. Hey, if you haven't seen that, definitely worth checking out. We are getting some questions too, which well, let me pop this one up first, actually, about legality, image rights usage, which we knew was going to come up. So this is something that makes sense to talk through a bit. Rory, since you just gave us a sort of a good answer there, why don't you just like jump into this? I'll just add anything on top of it. And I think we are talking through this yesterday. We're seemingly on the same page in terms of what we know right now, because there are some gray areas, but tell us what you do know.
Yeah. And also want to highlight Chrissy over here. Chrissy, perfect point. You know, again, we're going to talk about this. You know, we don't want to use images of other of previously copyrighted work to build image prompts. That is something that should be said, you know, right off the bat. Typically, just to clarify on that point, a lot of times if I'm going to use something for commercial purposes, I will tend to generate an image in Midjourney and then use that as an image prompt for another image. So, you know, even if I'm looking for something along the lines of a certain style or photographer or whatever, I will still do my own work in there, and then I will effectively translate that into an image prompt. So again, always trying to be cognizant of this. But let me see if I can pull this up real quick. Hopefully this doesn't crash the whole stream, everyone. Just give me, hang with me.
Oh, but man,
let's see. Should I even try it? Should I even do it?
No, go for it, man. Let's see if we can do it. But yeah, and just to while he's pulling that up, I think it's important to we are not legal consultants, right? So we only know what we know and what we've heard. So the things that I sort of say is follow the precedents in real time, right? Some people are actually you can keep up with some of these court cases and what is deemed as copyrighted, not copyrightable, right? There just was something that came out of hey, you can create an image in AI, but you can't copyright that image because there's no human touch to it, right? So we can dive into that here in a second as well. But Rory, yeah, go ahead and show us what you got.
Can we see this or no? Is this up on the screen?
There we go. Got it.
Cool. So basically, I've given a couple of talks to, larger groups of people and just, marketing professionals in general. Obviously, we have to cover our ground here. Right now, what Drew said, pretty much just going to try to expand on that a little bit. Again, not a lawyer. This is my own sort of understanding and interpretation of it, is essentially U.S. copyright, and this might be different in different locations, but basically saying that anything that is fully created by AI cannot be copyrighted. So whatever that is becomes free use. So whatever you put out there can be used by anybody. So the one thing to understand with that too is there's a gray area involved in it, and it says essentially that you can create a full AI image, but then whatever is edited by human touch becomes copyrightable. So again, if we took a picture of, myself, right? Or we generated a picture of me, an avatar of me, cut it out, put a different person in there. The background essentially would be fair use. And the new picture would be, or the picture that we created would essentially be, the copyrightable piece. Not the best example, but just an idea of what that means. Cause I don't personally know where this is going to go, because I feel like this technology is going to move way too fast for the legal system to keep up with. So just something to be aware of. But technically, under the Midjourney terms and conditions, anything that you generate is covered under their copyright. But I don't always trust that. And if you're going to use this for commercial use, this is the slide that I wanted to show you, because this is what can happen. So just know that this is a possibility. So I don't know if everyone's familiar with this photo. It was taken, 15, 20 years ago, maybe. It was on the cover of National Geographic. It was a visceral photo. It won a ton of awards. It was super impressive. Now, all I did to see if how Midjourney could really be a problem, right, was I took that photo. I didn't use an image prompt. All I did was go look up the photographer, the equipment that was used, the name of the photo, and then I put some descriptors in there. So if you can see this, basically, teenage girl, Afghan refugee, emerald eyes, red head scarf, National Geographic. That was the cover. Then I used effectively the photo information, and it popped out almost the same exact thing. This is so close.
It's wild. It's so wild.
I mean, even everything from this little green patch on the shoulder over here to the background is effectively the same. The positioning of the head, the eyes, everything is effectively the same. So this can happen, right? That. Just know that. So not everything that you produce is going to be perfect, and it's all could potentially be trained on something else. So typically what I do here is, if we're going to put anything out for commercial use, number one, utilizing reverse image search. That's a non-starter, have to do it. So just so you have basically an idea if this image lives anywhere on the internet or looks close to something that's copyrighted. So that, in a sense, basically will give you even if it's close, I stay away. So no shot, even if it comes remotely close. This is super close, so don't use this as the North Star here. It's going to be a little bit different every time, but that's something that I definitely want to highlight, so everyone can know that. But the other thing of it too is for commercial use, and to Chrissy's point as well, being very cognizant of copyrighted work. So in my prompts, and if we're doing anything commercial, we do not use artist names. No artist names. No copyrightable pieces like that. Don't want to use, different film names. Don't want to use different, really try to stay away from that. The good thing is you have all these other tools at your disposal that you can go and reverse engineer this if you wanted to. So I know you've probably seen this stuff on the internet, in the style of Wes Anderson. Great, cool. It comes out great on, comes out great as a production. But at the same time, if someone was to go, and again, I'm not a lawyer, someone was to go into a legal battle with you and go back through all of this simple processes that you took to generate that image, and that's your prompt, and it says in the style of Wes Anderson, just exposure. Like, it's just risk. I'm not playing that game. So like, we don't use that. And let's just say you wanted to use Wes Anderson style. You want to know an easier way? Go to ChatGPT, have it summarize what equipment he uses, what types of composition he uses, what types of color scheme he uses. Then you can play with it and make it your own. Am I saying that's ethically, responsible? I honestly don't know the answer, but it's way cleaner than going and doing something like, in the style of Wes Anderson. So that's sort of my wax poetic on this. I think, it's just something that we need to all have knowledge around if we're going to use this stuff for commercial purposes. But
yeah, I mean, look, we said this at the beginning, but AI is just moving so fast, right? I mean, we don't know what we don't know in terms of the way this is going to shake out. So just use your best judgment, consult legally. Chances are they probably don't know that much either, in terms of like real things happening in the moment, but they do have more of that professional sense, right? That's what they do. We are not legal consultants in any way. So take that for what it's worth. And I think that's Rory and I are both aligned in the way that we think about that, from a legal standpoint. So I think we hit that pretty good. Let's move on to another question here. Let me pull one up here. We have one from Yuli. Thanks for doing this. I'm interested in continuity. What do you do in order to keep consistency within a series of images?
You want to hit that one?
Yeah, I mean, look, for the sake of time, like we could show you how you can create character consistency in a close enough way where it works. Is it perfect? No. Is it easy to do? Not. I mean, kind of, but it's you have to do a loop around to get there, and it's not great. So I don't know about you, Roy, but I would expect that to improve. Maybe V6 type of thing. Like, it's going to be a major jumping point and feature that comes, right? The ability to do that. But that's where it comes into using things like, like there's a way to do it where you could split the image into 2 or 4, right? And it creates that same person, and then you got to go in and, manually crop it out. And it's yes, right? Like, you can do it. Is it easy? Do they make it easy for you to do? No. Right. So it's more or less that. Now, the other way that this could come into play too is not just photorealism, but also things like illustrations and icons. So that's also interesting to me too. If you think about like a mascot logo for a brand, or you think about icons or styles, right? You can create what's called like a character sheet or a model sheet or a sprite sheet. And that puts a bunch of those images in that same style, right, on one photo. Right. So you can, you have that same consistency, but again, that same problem arises where you're going to have to go in and chop those things up manually. Right. And unless I don't know of another way. Rory, what's your take on that?
So it's probably the most complicated thing to do on the tool. But, again, I would assume that that's going to be a little bit more. That's definitely if they were reading, anything on Twitter, if Midjourney, which it seems like they do, is just, respond to user feedback. Consistent characters is probably the most generated question.
It's a game-changing feature. Yeah. So I would imagine that's definitely on their radar, right?
Because seed to me doesn't work. Like, I've never had any, being totally honest, like I just never had any luck with seed.
I haven't either. No.
It's like, the way that I think about it is basically, if anyone's familiar with, I'm sure Audrey's in here. If you're familiar with ChatGPT, the more data you give it, the better your output's going to be. So when you think about it in those terms, like what Drew is trying to say is breaking down, like, you can split those images into 2 to 4 images. So like, you just put it in the prompt, like, split this into 4 images, and you'll get that same character in like multiple different positions. Now, to me, the best thing to do is just generate more data for that. So if you hit the vary function, so you have like a vary on that same image, you're going to get 4 more different options of that same person, like very subtle. Most of the time is going to keep it very close. So now when you take that, now you can image prompt with more than one image. So that typically tends to get as close as you can get, is just like feeding it more data. So like, if we did that 2 or 3 more times, then you have a grid of, let's just say, 16 to 20 different images that it can train itself off of almost. Now, something like Stable Diffusion, going to be a lot easier to do this. Midjourney right now, It's very complicated. Works a little bit easier with characters, like animated characters, as like we're very in tune with what a human face looks like and how to recognize the certain facial features as a human being. So it's very difficult to perfectly translate that. So there's really like, I would say if they're looking for consistency in that front, yes, super difficult. Consistency across like a look and feel, like creating like a branded look and feel for certain environments, certain products, certain, characters in a sense, like what you did specifically with building stock photography for like a stock library, right? For your,
the branded library. Yeah.
Like that. I think that's probably an interesting point to hit on, and again, how you're able to keep that consistency.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, look, from like a business standpoint, I think we talked about it, right? There's this gap that exists between stock photography and professional photography. And how do you source these images that feel custom to your brand, right? And think about things like time, cost, and the compromises you make to get there. So with that said, right, like that's what really fascinated me is just like at my previous company, we were black and yellow. It was hard to get photos in those environments. There were virtually no, there was no stock photography in that niche, right? So it was a real pain point for me. And then started to think about, okay, well, what is my ICP? How old are they? What do they look like, right? What do they wear when they're on the job? Where is the location on the job, right? And so some of those things that could be interchangeable, we're talking about prompt structures and some of these template ideas, right? Like what are some of these things that I can interchange and then ultimately, right, like create infinite number of images for and just recreate. So you can get to a point where you've got, I don't know, 5 or 7 looks, and then you can literally create thousands and thousands of images, right? And they're all different and they're all unique. And they all, more importantly, they all look specific to your brand and they tell a story, right? Versus, again, using stock photography where people recognize faces or images and so forth. I don't know if that's just marketing, folks, but like we all know what's stock and what's not. So I don't know. I think that's a very interesting thing because it was like, yeah, once I figured out those prompt templates, 1 to 2 hours to build thousands of images that we could use across things like slide decks, internal presentation, social, creative, blogs, podcasts, our website, like all of those things, right? I don't even have to think about it anymore. And I've got infinite choices. If I don't like the way something looks, I can go in and change it, right? I didn't hire a photographer to where I got to be like, oh shit, I'm stuck with this image. You've got all this flexibility that comes with it too. So super interesting. Let's move on to the next question. How do you keep track of keywords, codes, functions, scenes? Like, how do you keep track of this? You got a repository? What do you do?
There's a few things here, and I'm going to be totally transparent with everyone. I'm so unorganized when it comes to
dude, I'm so glad you said that. Me too.
So bad. I think I have default, and I think this is also like there is a human error portion of this, right? Because I've probably forgot more of my awesome prompts than I've generated. You know what I mean? Like all the different terms that have affected it in a certain way. I should be better at that. The one thing I am pretty solid at is using the preferred option list or the preferred. I'm escaping me right now, but there's a way to set your different parameter sets so that you can have those and just plug those in seamlessly. Typically, I'm using the same sort of look and feel for what I'm doing. A lot of the parameters, in a sense, like I know my aspect ratio is going to be something that I'm trying to fit into whatever publication I'm creating. Like stylized used to be like you pumped it to 1,000 and you had some really cool stuff. Now, if you pump it to 1,000, it starts to turn into chaos. So typically using like lower levels there, probably between like 200 and 400. Chaos, I'm using like anywhere from like 10 to 25. So I generally have a typical parameter set that I like to use. But like on the keyword side, I really just use a structure and then I change it up from there. So I have my standard formula always that I use is subject, environment, details about whatever scene I'm trying to set. I'll use a camera. I'll use some sort of potential depth of field if it's necessary or not. I'll use some lighting conditions and some composition. Now, the other things about that too is like my one main like recommendation is it. And my observation, maybe it's totally wrong. I don't know. But typically whatever is first in the prompt, That's what Midjourney is hitting on the most. It can say whatever it wants in the shortened feature. To me, it's BS because I've gone through that a million times. It's never correct. So whatever you put first is what it's going to focus on. The further down the prompt and to the back end you get, not going to be as consistent or as highlighted in a sense. So if you want to focus on the lighting, put the lighting element first. If you want to focus on the composition, put that first. If you want to focus on the environment, put that first. Yeah. And if you don't, like, try a test, because it's like if you put, Drew in, the New York City, right? Drew in New York City might show Drew really close to the photo. If you put New York City street and then, a picture of Drew, it might be Drew pushed back in the image a lot. So it's understanding these little different control pieces. So, it's building different aspects as you go. It's all trial and error at the end of the day, but having a structure helps. Sorry for going way down the rabbit hole.
No, dude, that was great. Yeah. Bill, I've canceled my stock image subscription.
Good, Bill.
That's I think like the other point I was going to make with that is just like with all these other, and I think this is what's interesting about Midjourney. There are multiple avenues to get to the same place.
Yeah.
Right. So to Rory's point, you could play with the order or the hierarchy of that, and you could utilize something like the shorten command too, just to kind of see how they're weighting the keywords or the tokens, just to kind of check that out if you really want to go deep into that. Or like something I've been playing around with more recently is the multi-prompting, So that is essentially where you use the double colon and you can assign a numerical weight in terms of, hey, Midjourney, pay a little bit more attention to this than this, and so you can kind of like between the hierarchy and multi-prompting, there are a couple different things that you can try, right, to get to the result that you want. And some cases it may be better just on the hierarchy and you can solve it there. Some that maybe are a little bit more complicated, maybe you have to solve on the multi-prompting front. So like that's another way that you can go about getting it. And that all circles back to what we started with and what you started with along the lines of just spending time in there, building reps, because every time I'm in there, I learn something new, I think. Now, just to go back quickly to that question about me, like, how do I keep that organized? I'm similar to you. I'm not organized in that sense. I think when I first started doing Midjourney, I had no idea what I was doing. I was copying, pasting things and throwing them in a Notion doc. And then, that Notion doc would just fill up. And I'm just like, this can't be the best way. So what I just do is I leave it all in my Midjourney archive, right? And just remember, you can revisit all those old images, right? So if you put in one keyword, you can find that image in your huge pile of images. I have no idea how many jobs you've run, Rory, but like, I think I'm like approaching 50K and it's stupid. So, but like you can revisit old things, right? And take those old prompts. So you don't have to necessarily have a storage system or organization sense. Could it be better to like bubble those things up? Yeah, I think so. Like, so, using Midjourney's platform, you could go through your own photos and rate them. You could favorite them so you know which ones you want to revisit. Like, so there are some things that you can do. Is it a perfect system? No, but I don't know what a perfect system looks like when you're generating this many images at scale, right, over time, because you've probably seen Rory and Mai's images. You've probably seen 0.001% of the images we've created. You know what I mean? So it's wild when you think about it.
The other thing is I will share a 2-second story that Drew was the first person to tell me about the archive after I was about 5 months in. And I was like, I wish I could go find my photos from like the beginning. And he's like, you can, it's right at the top right. I was like, come on, really? Jesus. But the other thing too, like when it comes to organizing elements, I think there's something that was interesting here that Ben said, is utilizing ChatGPT as your friend, right? Like that can be super helpful for generating new prompt ideas, right? Because like, there's certain things that I'm looking for when I look at a photo, right? Maybe I want to like make an advertisement, just a hypothetical advertisement for like Audi. And, you want that like motion blur look with the light trails coming off the back. Now, I don't know how to technically describe that, like from to prompt. So you can use ChatGPT to say like, what are some motion effects in cinematography? Bang, you'll get a list of like, 20, then you can go plug them in and try it. And that's how typically some of this good stuff comes out. So like something like as simple as that, or finding professional cameras or what different cameras are used for. Like, why would I use a 100mm lens versus a 50mm lens? Like, that stuff does play a role. Like, if you prompt those with permutation prompts, you do 35, 50, 100mm next to next to each other, you're going to get different outputs. So it does happen. Or you get different cameras, right? Like an iPhone, iPhone 14 versus Polaroid. It's going to be a totally different look and feel because that's the visual signature. So I think that's a really good, interesting comment there on the ChatGPT side to help with prompting. And then if you have a structure, you can just start to build these for yourself.
LLMs are amazing at brainstorming and ideation. Amazing. So use it. You know what I mean? That is one of the best use cases you have for something like ChatGPT right now. And so, Ben just asked, I love a negative prompt go-to, AKA no deformed hands, ugly faces. Is there one?
There's typically what I do, Ben, and I don't have as many problems with hands as I used to. Like, I don't, for whatever reason, oftentimes a very subtle will work. Like, if you run it once or twice, bang, bang, like, you get good hands. Even if that's the case, or you can use the vary region tool.
Thank God for the vary region now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because if you liked an image and there was just something wrong with the hands, you had to take that into Photoshop, or even before that was available, right? Like, you just couldn't. You're just like, oh, I like this photo, but I can't do nothing about it.
Yeah. You can also just pop it into, if you have a Photoshop subscription, pop it in there. Typically it works on the first shot, generative fill, highlight the hand. If you really like the photo, I'm just saying, like, I try to do some stuff with hands just to make sure that it still works all the time. Like, I'll try to do like photography of hands, 3 out of the 4 suck, but 1 is normal.
Yeah.
It happens. So it's just like, just getting it down to a much more efficient science. So you don't have to like frustrate over it. But that's how are we doing on time here?
We got about 3 minutes left. Right. I think one thing that we could touch on also is just like what's going on with Midjourney in the future, right? Like what just happened. So I don't think either of us posted about this, but Midjourney just launched phase 1 of their own UI. So their own interface. They're moving away from Discord, if you haven't already heard that. That's going to take place soon. The first step was to put out sort of this new beta part of their website, which basically moves quicker, gives you all of your archive very easily. Everything loads faster. It's just a much cleaner, less laggy, less like temperamental environment, I would say, like right now. And then what's going to come later, right, is the ability to just prompt and create inside that tool. So Discord's going away. So just keep that in mind. And, I think just with what Midjourney's got planned for V6 and whether something happens in between, V6 is it's going to be incredible. I'm expecting higher quality, better coherence with some of the text. We've already talked a little bit too about like, where's Midjourney going from here? Like, they're going to go into video in 3D. There was some talk about that as well. So, let's jump into that a little bit. Outside of what I just said, anything else like stand out for you? What are you looking forward to with Midjourney in the future? What
there's obviously I've been overly impressed with how they respond to user feedback. It seems like every time they release a new feature, it's like, well, that was a problem I had. The upscale, I was always using different upscalers. And then it's like, okay, here's your upscale. Thank you. It's just like every single time it feels like that. They come out with, generative fill comes out. It's like, okay, vary region comes out. They're counter punching everything that's going on in the market. But also I think there's some talk about style sets. So going back to keeping consistency to that before, there's going to be some help in terms of building your prompt style. So I think that is an interesting feature that might or might not get released. I've heard about it in their office hours, but that would be overwhelmingly awesome for keeping consistency and keeping a look and feel. So I don't know where it's going. Don't know if it'll be, I think it's going to be a big release when it happens and everyone's going to go nuts about it. And we're going to do a lot of content and it's going to be fun. But overall, I think, getting the coherence to me is the most exciting piece, is just like listening to exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah. There's still a little bit of misinterpretation there, right? I think the other things we've already seen either in the chat or we've talked about: hands, words, character consistency. The other thing that bothers me is the shots of people from far away.
Yeah.
Right. mashes their face, which sucks. And usually the very region does not fix that. So that to me is going to be a game changer as well. Like being able to really get like more of those 16:9 shots that aren't zoomed in, or more of that landscape style to really pan out. That's going to be, I think, a game changer too. So a lot of things coming. Jason just said, "Hey, like, what's the time frame on Midjourney moving away?" They haven't given us an exact time frame. They just I get the feeling, Rory, like I was thinking end of the year, and it's I don't know. I don't know if they're moving that fast. They keep saying they're kind of behind on some of that. And the way that Midjourney works too is it's very much a like grassroots community, and they keep a lot of that pretty close to their chest outside of the office hours. They don't really give you exact dates. They'll just say, "Hey, look, like when they're really close, something should be dropping in the next week." They don't tell you the day. They don't tell you the time. They don't care if you're on vacation, like Rory was when I think the upscaler dropped. Like nothing like that. So that's typically how they operate. One other interesting thing that him and I were talking about too is Midjourney does not take VC funding, or hasn't taken VC funding, whereas these other companies could or have, right? So how does that impact their ability to keep up and stay on top? That's an interesting topic, talking point. We could jump into it another time, but I know we're at the top of the hour. Rory, you got anything else you want to add before you jump?
I think we covered like a ton here in 45 minutes.
We tried to talk fast.
We tried. Sorry, everyone. But if this is something that people like, we'll do it again. I mean, we got a lot to say. We got a lot. Obviously going to be a lot of new developments, and we're always doing new stuff. So yeah, I mean, like this was cool. I appreciate everyone hanging with us through the little technical snafu. Except we can create art with robots, but sometimes LinkedIn live stream a little hard.
Man, LinkedIn. Yeah. Hey guys, if you do want us to do another one of these, just let us know in the comments real quick, because him and I have talked about it. We want to make sure that we're adding value and not just on here being talking heads. So that's important. Mark, you asked if the images behind me are AI. No, they're an artist here in Atlanta. He does these big head photos of rappers and stuff. So I'm in Atlanta. I'm in a dungeon here. It only made sense to do Outcast. Bill says bring slides next time. We have slides. We can do slides.
Too many.
Okay. Well, hey, thanks everyone for joining us. We'll do it again. Great. Thanks for the questions. And we'll see you guys soon.
Awesome.
Thanks Rory.
See you, Drew. Later, man.
Later.